Being in the community for so many years, one of the most common questions I see is, how do I beat Cleave? And one of the most common sentiments I've been seeing is, why does Smilegate only help Cleave players? Why is it so damn cringe? Which is honestly kind of a strange question to be asking, consider we are in the middle of one of the heaviest tank down metas in the history of the game, where being slow and steady is rewarded, and being fast is just too risky. So in today's video, we're going to be answering exactly those questions. How do we beat Cleave? We'll go over Cleave's basic mechanics, how they team build, and how to categorize and beat them. And we'll go over a few different examples in this exact metagame. So if you're here for that, welcome aboard. I'm Uncle Val, strap on in and let's fly. What is Cleave? To my knowledge, Cleave is a playstyle that originated from Epic 7's father, Summoner War, where you use the speed gear to set up a chain of turns, and the goal is by the end of all of these turns, the victim player, the slower players, will have lost their entire team, or more importantly, their main win condition unit. In every one of these communities, the overwhelming common sentiment is that Cleavers, due to the non-interactive nature of their draft, are cringe. They set up their team, they go for their defense break, maybe an attack buff, CR push, and boom, you died. And in a turn-based game, if you don't properly draft or team build against something like this, you can see how it leads to a lot of frustration because they get to go first in a turn-based game. And I get it, nobody wants to be on the receiving end of an OTK, and just because the other guy has the speed gear, he gets to do that? Nah. Beating Cleave is really not that hard. So the key here is that we have to draft in a specific way that defies the norm of whatever your playstyle is and pick anti-Cleave, basically pivoting our entire strategy to play defense. If you've been dying to Cleave a lot, then this is probably the key ingredient that you've been missing, especially in a tank heavy meta like we're in now. Just building a few units will arm you to make the pivot that you'll need into anti-Cleave and keep your rank points safe. To defeat Cleave, one must see the problem for what it truly is. So you can think of Cleave like maybe your favorite reading material off of your favorite website. They got tags, and those tags are really useful. Let's start off with the basic tags that everybody should be familiar with. Every Cleave starts off with their openers, characters with high base speed or passives that give them speed, letting them take the first turn and become the engine to their offense, either generating more turns or disabling the opponent. Examples of this are characters like Zio, Lidica, New Moon Luna, Renak, Hellion Lua, and Lil Wolf Peyra. There are also bridges. These are the units that have some element of combat readiness manipulation in their skill kit. They swoop, take the boost, and then use the rest of their kit to boost the rest of their team or to push back the enemy by taking the lead the opener have gotten with the speed and generate a turn chain. That is their main job, chaining the turns together. Examples of characters of bridges are characters like Frida, Requiem Rana, Afternoon Soak Flan, Silverblade Araminta, Blooming Lidica, and Summertime Iseria. And lastly, you got your finisher as the core part of a Cleave, the ones responsible for finishing the match. They usually have the most damage baked into their kit, but don't generate as much turn or utility as they go. But what that means is your opponent have lost once their turn is finished, or at least they should have. Examples of character like this are Bloodblade Corinne, Eternal Wanderer Ludwig, Successor Teiyu, Afternoon Soak Flan. And you'll see a lot of these characters have multiple tags or role overlaps, and the best characters for these playstyles usually do just that. They fill multiple roles on the team, so you need to be able to read the ebb and flow of their team building extremely well. Now, beyond these basic roles, you also have things like imprint characters, which is something you'll rarely see unless you are also a speed player yourself, because this is what speed mirror matches are all about. You are going to use them to race, but for those who don't race, these guys are normally picked up due to their imprint effect of giving their team speed, which deters the enemy from racing the Cleaver. These imprint units can also fit a variety of other roles, like they could be a bridge, a finisher, or even an opener themselves. Examples like this are Veronica, Every Single Shuri, Green Vildred, Wanderer Soak, and Green Sid. And lastly, we have the anchors, which is the last main role I want to cover. Depending on the metagame, anchors generally come and go since they're not a core part of the team. They're not a part of the combo of the turn chain. An anchor's job is independent of the turn chain. You usually pick an anchor when you're initiating a pivot. So when the opponent is too defensive, then the Cleaver will take an anchor to try to somehow 1v4 or to revive his units. It's usually a really tricky unit to deal with, so that the opponent really gotta think long and hard about how they can pivot their team construction. Examples of character like this are Blood Moon Haze, Boss Arunka, Spirit Eye Celine, Death Dealer Ray, and Mort. As you can see, team building for Cleave follows a pretty strict formula, and each tag gives a team a part of its unique identity. And according to these identities, you should be able to find the appropriate units in the game to shut that shit down. This is a weakness that is almost exclusive to Cleave due to their team building requirements. It's not easy making a turn chain in Epic 7, and doing that usually limits you to quite a few units, needing to turn chain together as a primary way to stop any form of counterplay, and that's where we as players come in. Now keep in mind, tagging these enemy teams and counterpicking them based on these tags work versus actually most compositions, but extra well versus Cleave since they're very formulaic and they don't pivot very well until you run into the really good players, then they pivot like beasts. But until then, once you disrupt their turn, you manage to steal a turn away, it's GG versus most Cleavers. So we have just talked about what these tags could be. How do you process them? You know, what are most of these tags? Well, there's actually a lot, so let's go over just most of the common ones, what units counter them, and the stats I have built onto those units. AoEs, this is where Cleave started. The main aim of these teams is to set up a turn chain where they can secure first turn, disarm the defenders, maybe land some defense break, pull out the attack buff on their big boy, and send them into war. Units that fit this mold are BBK, ML Ludwig, both Vildreds, both Pavels, and even openers like Ran and Peyra. The counters here include Aureus. Aureus will always be the best damage mitigating option in the game. You can't shut it down with seals or almost any debuffs outside of Frostbite, which is pretty rare. And setting up a BBK, fully setting her up, mind you, 4k attack, 350 crit damage, attack buff, defense buff, the whole bells and whistles, and Aureus will still shave a third off of all incoming damage. Fallen Cecilia has the biggest margin of damage mitigation thanks to her shielding passive, which is like a protection set for free, but any Aureus Knight with the protection set will get her done. Elena has a passive that reduces incoming AoE damage by 20% at max, and it gives her additional combat readiness when her team takes an AoE skill off of the opener. Most of the time, what that does is let her steal the turn, dropping that invaluable invincibility buff and completely shutting out the damage window for Cleavers. So once you have stolen that turn, you should see a win come through, and you'll be seeing her a lot in this video. Elbra's Ritual Sword and counter attacks are also great options into AoE Cleaves because Cleave teams' squishy health pool usually don't take the damage very well. 1 to 2 Elbrus activations on the right units usually send a Cleave team packing home. A Miki is a ML5 unit that's disguised as a 3-star specialty change. She does so many things, I don't have the time to list them all, so go read her kit in the logs, okay? Just build her, you won't regret it. This is another character you'll be seeing a lot in this video. Like, honestly, if you just build a Miki and Elena and play the game normally as a standard or tank down player, you should just be able to beat Cleave. Single target, obviously, it's the opposite of a traditional Cleave. This style of combo teams exists for one purpose: surgically remove your damage dealer and your biggest threats. Ignore tanks that usually are just there as an HP battery and can't do any damage. Once you pick off the enemy's win condition, you can't lose the game. Units that fit this mold are characters like Elagos, Sid, Afternoon Soak Flan, Successor Teiyu, and Renak. And few of the ways you can counter this style is, well, once again, Aureus. You could just assume Aureus is in every single one of these, okay? Aureus is the most important thing. Having an HP battery on any unit that gives you 33% more EHP will let you take a beating hard, okay? Just pretend you're always going to be taking Aureus on third pick ban protection if possible. A defensive anchor is great here. You need a unit that's going to be taking the beating as much as possible, and either they have super high effective HP or something like a Miki with effect resistance and an immortality buff sitting out there in the back. Stealth. So you guys know how you guys have that defensive anchor there, right? Once you got that and your opponent's gonna have a hard time punching through a big fat character there taking all of their hits, you can hide a couple of stealth-based disruptor or damage dealers behind them, and they should just be able to close out the game for you if they somehow don't get flushed out of stealth and get picked off. A reviver like Ruel or BM Haste is great here since this is a playstyle where the aggressor needs to expend big cooldowns in order to output extreme extreme amounts of damage versus a single character. Having revivers can cause big tempo swings where attackers now need to either ban or kill off these pesky revivers before their damage is actually meaningful and gets swung back completely. Ruel is a great reviver versus single target cleavers and nukers because if they don't kill her first, she just undoes all of their damage with a single button click. Soulburn Cleave, as the name implies, are characters that can abuse one of the strongest mechanics in the game to bypass whole stat requirements. This is a very narrow composition to run, but can also swing a lot of power. So having one of these counters is super necessary to ensure you don't give any of these players free points. Common characters you see with this archetype is Frida, who is the Soulburn queen of the game. Her kit generates so many souls and is often picked on second or third pick. When you see her, you know a soul cleave is coming. The cool part about her is she can either go high speed or high effect resistance, so you don't really know if you should be playing turn 1 or turn 2 versus her, and a lot of times guessing incorrectly is just a straight up loss. So you have to play slow and steady. Zio is another character here, and I think he's the preferred opener for Soul's Cleave as he is a mage, and you can assume all mages played in this cleave will carry a Tagahel's Ancient Book, which is plus 20 souls. In this context, due to imprint characters not being very mage focused and can carry books, Soul Cleavers prefer to just take Zio so they no longer have to worry about racing or imprinting. ML Ludwig is the default finisher for Soulburn Cleave since he scales the most damage with this playstyle. He is usually picked on third pick ban protection with a Bellion in the pre-bans. Afternoon Soak Flan is another commonly picked character with this style actually, since many of the times in Soulburn Cleave, you're going to be soul burning characters S1 a lot. Their skill 1 auto attack usually give them a extra turn soul burn, which is a huge enabler for Afternoon Soak Flan to pop off and stack damage with. When you're playing against this draft specifically, you want to make sure you have one between Bellion or ML Arya. They're each one character who could really lock out Soulburn playstyles. Expect to have one of them pre-banned so you get the other one and why this playstyle has a place in the metagame in the first place. When ML Arya is here, I'd imagine this game gets a lot harder because they can't ban both of these and then also pre-ban Harsetti, for example. Now, if they are in fact playing into a Soulburn Cleave and you have one of these characters locked in on third pick, it's usually a free win. Now, if you don't have one of these characters or they're both pre-banned, then you can offer something like an Empyrean Illianav or Ruel of Light, and those are the premium win buttons. But what if you don't have those premium free win buttons like Bellion or ML Arya? Then you can mechanically check their other tags, like for example with Empyrean Illianav or Ruel of Light. Just get these super heavy fatty characters taking all of those hits. Empyrean can shut down their finishers like ML Ludwig due to her passive blocking out penetration damage, while Ruel can just undo a whole bunch of damage if she can survive off of her 2 lives and get a big revive off. And of course, Yavamaki. She just works, man. This character is so good through so many cleaves, okay? Make sure you have her. Debuff. Debuff Cleave is the remnants of actually an old playstyle, Control. Control as a playstyle died in Season 5 due to the buffs and releases of characters like Mediator Koeric, Designer Lilibet, just characters who can cleanse debuffs indiscriminately. You can't stun them out of doing their jobs, but players actually found a way to combo these units with other disruptors like Requiem Roana to create an endless chain of debuffs that you can't really get out of. So if you were wondering where the Control playstyle went after Season 5, they went and packed it up and went to Cleave. So the units you'll see here is Lidica, which is the default opener for Control Cleave. Lidica got buffed to be one of the strongest and fastest openers to be in the game. She's got it all. She can AoE, strip, debuff, CR control, single target, defense break, and put up skill nullifiers for her team. You name it. Anything you want for a Cleave team, she does it. You need a Lidica answer if you want to play the game turn 2 in 2025. By the way, guys, that's just Elena. Make sure you build your Elena. Other openers they could potentially play are New Moon Luna, ML Peyra, Sea Phantom Polly, and Renak. The usual suspects. If you're not playing Lidica, then Control is not that hard to figure out since each one of those openers actually creates a new branch that is kind of narrow and you will be able to narrow them down once you play against them enough. But they do open up different possibility and you have to figure out once those characters come out what they can do. The bridges you can expect for this archetype are notoriously annoying to fight and are some of the the highlights of this playstyle. These units are all handpicked to disable you one way or another so that you have no options of fighting back, and you really gotta pick and choose your battles. These characters are the ones including Blooming Lidica, Silverblade Araminta, and Requiem Roana. They either push you back, delay your cooldown, or just stun you outright, and you always gotta make sure you answer these correctly. This is actually one of the playstyles where they use a lot of anchoring, and there's some of the most annoying thing about these matchups is for their anchors to synergize really well with their bridges, which always gives them the option to pivot. Especially when you're posturing up to go super defensive, they will look to disarm you with these anchors. For example, if you rely too much on counterattack characters, then they can always pivot into a Mort. If you draft too many non-attacking cleanse characters, then you might get threatened by a Green Celine. Tank down too much versus the damage, while Death Dealer Ray is going to come out and peel off all of that HP layer by layer. Covering versus these anchors are the real test of skill for a lot of these drafts, and some of these guys can even beat a Miki. So one of the biggest counters for this playstyle is Bystander Huayang. In Sun Tzu's 36 strategies, the number one strategy is to run the fuck away, okay? That's the number one strategy. When you suspect your opponent of pulling a control match, taking Huayang on third pick ban protection is oftentimes a RNG but high percentage win condition. And that's exactly what happened in the Lunatic matches as well. When all of the premium options are banned, you're going to want to control your opponent, and when that happens, ML Huayang on 3, and that is off the table for your opponent. And honestly, that's just what RTA really is. It's a really fancy poker match, manipulating the odds in your favor to win uncertain matchups. Sage Vivian can make a good replacement, but I don't really think you want to do that. Belly and ML Aria, yep, it's them again. You're gonna notice a lot of mages in these compositions, and it's almost always safe to take one of these characters just to deny them their souls. And souls are a big enabler for this next category of units. ER Cleansers, peak of which is Elena and Infinite Horizon Acades. They aim to just resist the debuffs outright or use a passive to cleanse, steal a turn, and then launch their counter assault. They work super well most of the times unless they eat a Soulburn of some sort, which is why those previous units are important. You need to build a team around them and build around these synergies. Default Cleansers, Laya, Handguide, Designer Lilibet are useful when there are just too many debuffs. These are useful if there are just too many debuffs and they get Soulburn, so ER Cleansers can't get their job done. These characters usually have 0 ER and rely on some other mechanic to cleanse them, so their weakness is usually tied to combat readiness manipulation, which will push them back the bar. You end up losing a lot of turns anyway, so avoid those matchups and these guys can actually save your game. And of course, unlike usual, no Amiki here. Unfortunately, this is the one team archetype that Amiki is super bad versus. CR push is the main way cleavers can chain their turns. Unless you just play ungodly slow, which will happen, the enemy will almost always want to get some kind of CR push in their team. By increasing the combat readiness of the next character in line, they can essentially create a turn chain. Now, the units you see a lot responsible for this are characters like ML Peyra and Frida, who are hybrid units that swing between being openers and bridges, and they can both generate a lot of CR on their own or be played with another opener. You'll also find a lot of really annoying bridges that can manipulate combat readiness either one way, boosting their team, or push your team back, which manipulates them both ways, like Afternoon Soak Flan, Requiem Roana, Summertime Iceria. And when you counterplay these, two characters come to mind, Politis and Abyssal Euphine. These are the only characters in the game who can cut CR push by half. By all means, you can even take Together, which will reduce combat readiness push by 100%. Whenever you take one of these characters, you'll always want to pair them with a cutter, whose job it is to check their openers and attempt to steal or cut the turn that follows the opener. They each have different mechanics that lets them steal the turn and have different matchups, and you really want to learn which ones can be picked into which openers. For example, Green Celine is great versus Sea Phantom Politis because unless she skips the turn, Green Celine will be able to steal the turn, hit unit super hard, and then have her S3 ready to hit something else. You can also pick openers with your combat readiness holders. For example, if you just pick ML Lua with combat readiness holders, if your opponent can't finish their turn chain, well, they lose every other turn because Lua can just strip their buffs and provoke their units. If you watch the standard video, there I actually go over all the different matchups on openers versus each other, but in short, you can take any openers and properly protect them. They should be able to just shut down every every other unit in a Cleave team besides their opener for you. Now, there are a lot more ways to categorize and tag Cleave units by their mechanics, but these are the biggest tags and ways of breaking down their draft. Many times you'll find one counter that overlaps in multiple roles, and that's when you should feel really good about taking those specific matchups. But for this video, we'll cut it here today since I'm sure that's enough information for you guys for now. Think about how these teams work and let me know in the comments what you'd like to see in a similar video. Now that you guys know how to categorize and differentiate between these Cleaves, how do you actually beat them? Here we'll go into an example. We have an opponent with the draft you see here. This is what I've tagged him with really quickly, just off the top of my head. You're not going to be able to come up with every single property these characters have, but just a brief glance, this is what I got. So let's try to play around this. Most of his openers are single target, so he has single target, BBK, and Knockwall are AoE. He has 3 characters that drop debuffs, so he has debuffs, disruption, but everything is dealt versus the Bloodblade Corinne, so he has raw damage in his Cleave. It also seems like he has a mage, so Soulburn might be on the table for him as well, and there's 3 characters that can strip buffs for buff strip. Do keep in mind, this does not have to be perfect. As long as you come up with enough mechanics around these characters, this is all you need to generate yourself a win. Last pick here is Briar Witch Iceria, which is also an AoE defense breaker, but most importantly, she inflicts extinction, which blocks out revivers, so that is something you have to take into consideration when you're making your post ban. Now think about it this way, guys. When you see a team like this, how would you guys pick and draft to stop something like this? And let me show you guys how I chose to stop this draft. Let me explain. His first pick is Zeo, so in my mind, racing him is off the table. We need to tank it down like a good boy, so our first 2 picks are the best 2 tanks in the game with damage mitigation passive. New Moon Luna is pre-banned, so our damage mitigation, especially in a passive, is at a premium. Veronica versus BBK is a standard package for Cleavers at this point, and BBK on Ban Protect is going to be his main payload, and Veronica is the missile that delivers her. By imprinting the opener, it makes him super hard to race and crack open, and the defense break allows him to crack open that turtle shell so BBK can get her resets. So at this point, the draft is starting to take complete form. You got your unstoppable force versus immovable objects. I would have loved to race him, but having both Veronica and Zeo makes it impossible to race. And since I plan on fully playing turn 2, our best choices here are Bellion, who is a counterattack bruiser that can block out souls, and Ruel, a really tanky reviver that can undo a lot of the BBK damage. And the plan here is simple. Bellion is super tanky and she does a good bit of damage with her own brand of disrupt, the provoke off of her skill 3. Ruel is basically a second Bellion. Since I can't think of anything better to pick here, worst case scenario is Ruel makes it through the draft and Bellion gets picked off, then I can fully revive the Bellion. She can recover the loss of a Bellion if she gets picked off here. Next comes Monk plus Briar Witch Iceria. Monk has even more debuffs against counter attack, locks it out completely, and the cooldown delay. But more importantly, the Briar Witch Iceria, which comes with extinction on her passive, which dumpsters our Ruel, so that has to go. And here we can use the strongest tool available to a second pick player, which is do your post ban first, right? I already know I'm going to be banning the Briar Witch Iceria, so all I need to do is pick something on last pick here, which beats everything else. Knowing Briar Witch Iceria is gone, and I notice he doesn't have a lot of cleanse. Here, let's just go for Sage Ball, right? Sage Ball has a good amount of ER, which should be able to bypass his Zeo, and once the Sage Ball steals that turn after the Zeo, he can't chain into the Renak, he can't chain into his Knockwall, gets put to sleep. I should be able to win that game from that point on with my third pick Bellion. And here, confidence is key. I confidently just immediately slam the Sage Ball. Without knowing my stat line, he needs to ban him because his odds of losing the game with Sage Ball in the game is just too great. So in this match, even when we do take a couple of defense breaks, we actually end up weathering the storm. Bellion blocks out the Soulburn, so BBK does not have Soulburn, does not have attack up, and actually manages to deny all the damage. Even with the cooldown delay, we end up doing enough damage to just tempo swing it back against him, and all of these tank units is just too much for him to close out. So that would be the first example. If you want to keep going, I got a second one over here. Let's take a look at this one. Take a quick look at the draft. This is how I have the draft tagged, and let's skip the long-winded explanation for each unit. How would you guys draft versus this enemy? Note, I have first pick. And boom. Yeah, I basically just take the normal tank down opener. If you watched the last video, you know exactly what those 3 units are, how to play them, how to replace them. And once I noticed that his entire draft is super debuff and AoE focused, all I had to do was take 2 anti-debuff units here with strong passives. And to be honest, when you play so many defensive knights, it's just really hard to lose the match from there. Your opponent will have a really hard time locking you down. So let's take a matchup where we don't have first pick and we can't get Bossarunka. That's usually the biggest swing factor in a lot of these matchups. Our opponent here picks Bossarunka off of first pick. So tell me, how would you guys draft versus this? This is actually a bit of a tricky question since this isn't a full cleave, it's more of an aggro draft that our opponents pivoted off of this Bossarunka. This is the full draft. He first goes Bossarunka as his main anchor, so I have to pick up the other OP unit, Renak. Together with Fallen Cecilia, I take away his options to pick up fixed damage characters. If he goes for a tank down draft, then he's going to need to pick up Empyrean Ilanav. If he goes for cleave, then he needs to secure Zio. And of course he responds with Spirit Eye, Celine plus Zio, which is a pretty strong combo since Spirit Eye loves to use Soulburn and doesn't really need a bridge to function super well, and it takes advantage of the third pick Zio, who is there to stop the Renak. Now, I don't want him to enable that Soulburn package, so I'm going to take Bellion on 3, which is a supernatural choice since she has the 3F artifact rate versus the Spirit Eye Celine as well. And Ruel here is just an excellent reviver since he just has so many single target characters. So with Souls off the table, then his best finisher in the draft is going to be Successor Teiyu, who has the most damage output out of the entire game's roster if you get him going, and ML Huayang, which is a solid pickup considering I have so many tanky light units. Now, as a second pick, I know I'm gonna have to ban ML Teiyu because his damage cap is just way too high, and I want to limit the damage potential my opponent has access to already. With ML Teiyu gone, it just looks like he has a single target nuker draft without a lot of buff strips. One character come to mind. I'm gonna take Landy. Landy with Wall of Water is great into all of his single target thanks to her stealth and cannot be counterattacked off of her S3, and the amount of buffs should give me a lot of cheeky greater attack buffs and just bypass everything he's got. He ends up having to ban the Ruel anyway due to Bellion being on ban protection. Denying the Huayang Soulburn versus Ruel means he doesn't get a guarantee way to one-shot her, especially not when I also have a Fallen Cecilia. So that way, we get to keep the Landy and use her to snowball the rest of the match with so much AoE damage. Green Landy honestly doesn't even care about the Bossarunka, and that damage penetration will go through and punch through his team anyhow. So as you guys can see, if you understand the mechanics behind Cleave, how they change their turns together, and honestly just have a few special RGB units prepared, you should be farming these guys for their RTA points. Because the reality is, even in our turn-based, speed-based video game, Cleaves has stopped being OP or even a strong option months ago. If you just look at Hall of Fame, there are just such a strong presence for tank down players like KHM and Alifton, especially Alifton considering that he's a free-to-play player as well. There's just no reason for anybody to be losing to Cleave. And honestly, a lot of these guys I see complaining on Reddit or Stove, if they just actually spend their time optimizing their account and playing the game, even with limited units, gear, and time to play, they should be farming a playstyle that just doesn't have a good matchup into the strongest playstyles in the game. In any case, I hope this was a helpful video to you guys, whether you're a veteran or a new player venturing into Arena for the first time. Of course, if it was helpful, you can help me back plenty by just liking and subscribing the video. Leave a comment if you have any suggestions. That stuff helps small channel like this one so much. As always, if you think there's a topic that warrants, the attention of the next video, feel free to comment down below or upvote a comment you see. I actually read all the comments and pick out a lot of video that way. But for now, that's all I have. I'll see you guys in the next video, alright? Take care. See ya.